Ladies and gentlemen, today I stand before you to discuss an issue that profoundly affects the economy and the lives of millions of Americans: the tariff policy on the automotive industry. This is not just a story about tax rates or trade. It is a decision with long-term consequences for jobs, prices, and America's competitiveness in the global market. We all know that the automotive industry is not only a symbol of prosperity, but also a crucial pillar of the U.S. economy. Since the early 20th century, America has led the world in automobile manufacturing, creating millions of jobs and contributing significantly to the national GDP. But my friends, recent changes in trade policy are presenting significant challenges to this industry. The administration has imposed a 25% tariff on imported cars and auto parts. The goal of this policy is to boost domestic production and protect American jobs. But is the reality that simple? Let's take a look at some of the key impacts of this policy. First, car prices will rise significantly. Even vehicles assembled in the U.S. rely on thousands of imported components. When tariffs are imposed on these parts, production costs increase, and who bears the burden? The American consumer. Studies suggest that the price of a car could rise by $6,000 to $10,000. This not only affects consumers' wallets, but may also lead to reduced demand, causing car sales to decline. Second, this policy will disrupt the global supply chain. The automotive industry does not operate within the borders of a single country. A transmission might be made in Canada, tires from South Korea, and various other components from Mexico. Taxing these imports increases costs, lengthens production times, and could even force some manufacturers to halt assembly lines. Third, job creation may not happen as expected. As production costs rise, automakers may face a tough choice: either cut jobs or invest in automation to reduce expenses. So instead of creating more jobs, this policy could lead to job losses in the American auto industry. Finally, America's competitive position in the global market is at risk. While the U.S. attempts to protect its industry, China and other nations are aggressively expanding their exports with cheaper, more advanced vehicles. Without a well-thought-out strategy, the USA auto industry may fall behind. So what must we do? We need a smarter trade policy, one that balances protecting American workers while maintaining the industry's competitive edge. We should support domestic production, but not by isolating the U.S. from the global market. Instead, we must invest in technology, workforce training, and productivity improvements to uphold America's status as a leading automotive powerhouse. Trade policy is not just about numbers on a piece of paper. It is about decisions that directly impact the lives of millions. We need long-term solutions that not only protect current jobs, but also pave the way for a strong industry in the future. First, let's examine the direct impact of these tariffs on consumers. When a 25% tariff is imposed on imported cars and foreign components, the cost of
domestically produced vehicles also rises. Why? Because even made-in-USA cars rely on thousands of imported parts. As a result, car prices could rise by $6,000 to $10,000. This places a significant financial burden on consumers, reducing their ability to afford new cars and pushing many toward the used car market or delaying purchases altogether. Second, the impact on auto manufacturing and jobs is inevitable. The tariff policy is expected to create domestic jobs, but in reality, it may do the opposite. As production costs rise, companies will face a difficult choice: either cut labor or accelerate automation to save costs. This means that instead of creating more jobs for American workers, we may see a wave of investment in robots and technology replacing human labor. Beyond the US, the impact of tariffs extends globally. Major US trade partners like Mexico, Canada, the EU, and China could retaliate with their own tariffs. This would severely affect US car exports, especially as competitors like China continue to gain strength in the global market. Another consequence we cannot ignore is the broader economic impact. The auto industry is not just about manufacturing cars. It supports millions of jobs in supply chains, transportation, finance, and insurance. When car prices rise and demand declines, this could slow GDP growth, destabilize the economy, and increase inflation. We need a more reasonable trade policy, one that not only protects American workers, but also sustains the competitiveness of the automotive industry on the global stage. Let's remember that a strong economy cannot rely solely on trade barriers, but must be built on innovation, technological investment, and long-term strategic development. Trump's goals. First, Trump aims to boost domestic production and protect American jobs. For decades, U.S. auto plants have shut down as companies moved production overseas, particularly to Mexico and China, where labor costs are lower. Trump believes that by imposing high tariffs on imported cars and parts, he can force companies to bring manufacturing back to the U.S. This would not only safeguard American jobs, but also reduce dependence on foreign supply chains. Second, Trump wants to reduce the trade deficit and strengthen America's bargaining power. Each year, the U.S. imports hundreds of billions of dollars worth of cars and parts from countries like Japan, Germany, Canada, and Mexico, while exporting far fewer American-made vehicles. By imposing tariffs, Trump aims to make imported cars more expensive, encouraging consumers to buy domestically made vehicles. At the same time, this creates leverage for negotiating fairer trade agreements, particularly within the USMCA framework. Third, Trump seeks to reduce dependence on China and protect U.S. industries from rising global competition. China is now the world's largest car exporter and continues to dominate markets with affordable and advanced vehicles. Without preventive measures, Chinese cars could flood the U.S. market, threatening domestic manufacturers. Trump's tariffs act as a barrier to protect the U.S. auto industry from unfair competition and market manipulation. Fourth, Trump wants to secure supply chains and ensure economic security. Most vehicles produced in the U.S. are not entirely made in USA. They are assembled from thousands of imported parts. By taxing foreign components, Trump aims to push automakers to source materials domestically, reducing reliance on foreign partners and strengthening the U.S. economy. But will these goals actually be achieved? Trump may succeed in compelling some companies to invest in domestic production, but this does not necessarily mean more jobs. When production costs rise, automakers are more likely to automate rather than hire more workers. Additionally, high tariffs could lead to soaring car prices, reducing consumer demand, and potentially harming the overall economy. Trump's tariff policy is not just an economic decision, but also a political strategy. It reflects a strong approach to rebuilding America as a manufacturing powerhouse. However, its implementation must be carefully considered to avoid negative consequences for consumers and the broader economy. Ladies and gentlemen, today we are not just discussing dry economic figures. We are talking about $1 trillion industry facing unprecedented turbulence. The automotive sector, the backbone of American manufacturing, stands at a critical crossroads due to the tariff policies of former President Donald Trump. As 25% tariffs are imposed on imported cars and parts, the government's goal is to encourage domestic production. But is that truly the outcome? Or are we witnessing an industry spiraling into instability? First, rising car prices are burdening consumers. Anyone looking to buy a new car now faces record high prices. Experts estimate that U.S. produced cars could increase in price by up to $6,400 due to new tariffs. Working-class families and the middle class will bear the greatest burden. Second, supply chains are severely disrupted. With over 30,000 parts sourced globally, tariffs are causing shortages, delaying production, and increasing costs. This affects not just major automakers, but also thousands of smaller suppliers. Third, businesses are struggling, and profits are declining. Ford, GM, and Stellantis have reported billions in losses due to tariff impacts. Rising costs force them to either cut profits or raise prices, both of which are unsustainable. Fourth, job losses are becoming a stark reality. Instead of more American jobs, automation and cost-cutting may lead to increased unemployment. To truly protect this industry, we need a comprehensive strategy, not just trade barriers, but technological innovation and smart investment. Otherwise, we may not be witnessing a revival of American auto manufacturing, but its long-term decline. Thank you.